Today, I sit down with Benis Reffkin, who is an executive coach, the mom of three amazing kids, and the wife of Robert Reffkin, the CEO of Compass. What I enjoyed most about our conversation is her attitude and approach towards her different roles that makes her highly effective and successful. Now, if you find value in content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. And as always, I'm your referral partner out of San Francisco, Shawn Kunkler. Benis, thanks for joining me today. I am excited to have you.
Hi, Shawn. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, let's kind of dig in. For people who don't know you, which there's maybe like 10 people left, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, my name is Benis Reffkin. I am an executive coach. I focus my work on working with entrepreneurs predominantly, helping them with their goals, their ambitions. We tend to straddle from leadership to personal to business to executive. And I'm on this show in particular because I just happen to also coach a lot of real estate principals and teams, predominantly not as a real estate coach per se. All the clients I've had who are real estate agents are actually very good at being real estate agents. And so they just want to be better at being leaders and managing their businesses more effectively.
I think that was always a hard one for me, is the comprehension and then the conversion to the leadership aspects and kind of getting myself to understand that and then understanding how to do it better and more of it. How do you generally, when you sit down with somebody to coach, how do you figure out where to start? Do you do some sort of assessment or evaluation?
So I actually take my clients on a bit of a journey where we do about 3 to 4 sessions where we're just expanding their own sense of self-awareness around their own leadership styles, preferences. We take a look at their kind of full story and history and try to make sense of how is it that they've arrived to this point? What are these moments that have shaped them? A lot of these important moments in their lives end up creating sort of like a frame, a lens in which that they see the world and that they approach a lot of their challenges and obstacles. And so really making a sense of those and understanding, are those frames serving them? Some are probably really useful and help them get to where they are. Sometimes these same frames can also hold you back. And so we take a lot of time doing that. And then we also spend a lot of time just talking about the current state of affairs for them and looking at their full life, not just business, but personal as well. Because when we're looking to free up space to help them accomplish their goals, often we sometimes have to make room in other areas, right? Clear out some clutter in other parts of your life and be much more intentional, deliberate. And then I do use an assessment, actually. It's called the NBI brain instrument that helps someone understand what their thinking and work style preferences are, how their brain is wired, and how they naturally gravitate towards a certain set of activities and processes. And with all of this, the awareness of all of these different things help them be, much more clear about who they are as they're communicating their leadership style and how they want to collaborate with others. For them to have that clarity, it really can avoid a lot of conflict usually, right? And set the right expectations for everyone. So yeah, that's the gist of it.
It sounds so vulnerable. It's hard work. I mean, being very honest with yourself of like, hey, I'm really good at this thing, but I really suck at this thing. And I can either A, work on getting better at it, or find somebody who can do it better than me. It's really hard. It is. It's hard work.
And a lot of people, there's this natural tendency to want to control everything, especially if realtors, and especially if you've done it all on your own. It's such a it's sometimes a very lonely job in some ways, and I see why so many people want to team up and really have real collaboration and talented people to lean on. But But part of doing that successfully and leaning on others means letting go as well.
Sure.
And so how do you do that in a way where, you're letting go in a really safe and productive way?
I think that's the key word is having it. It's a safe space to do that. It's like a marriage, right? It's like you have to be like, all right, here's my underbelly. Be careful.
Yeah.
Be gentle. But getting there is in building a team and putting yourself out there as a leader to attract those right people and to guide them to be on the same thought pattern it's challenging work for sure.
Hey, John. Sure. And a lot of the agents I've worked with, there's some who are new to the whole team building thing. And so I think that there's a lot of work that agents should do to really assess whether a team is right for them in the first place and what that structure should look like, and really try to get awareness around how is your job going to change now that you have this new set of really responsibilities. You go from producing and closing deals and making transactions happen to now managing people and training and coaching and being a leader. Like, that is very different skill set. And I find a lot of people want to get into it more so because they don't want to be alone. They want to make more money, and they want to have more time.
Yeah.
And if you have a team, the goal is that those things should be accomplished, but it takes up a lot of time and investment up front before any of that is realized.
It's very true. And for me, one of the challenges is having had a sales background prior to getting into real estate, I felt rewarded by closing the sale, right? And by chasing the next opportunity. And I had to recalibrate myself to then feel rewarded when other people achieve their goals. And that was a really hard thing for me to step back and evaluate and then realize and then accept and kind of adjust.
Yeah. And it's okay. Like, so once you know what type of leader you want to be, then you can build a team around that. And so I've had clients who they really don't want to spend that much time kind of coddling or training and so it's like, okay, so how about you focus on finding real self-starters, self-initiating, somewhat already successful agents to kind of partner up with more so than, a bunch of younger agents who are just starting out and need a lot of direction, right? So it's being really thoughtful there on what that partnership looks like and what the dynamic is between you as the principal and the other people on your team.
That is brilliant. I've actually never thought of it from that perspective of backing into it. Like, what type of leader are you? Do you just want self-starters? Like, that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah. And the truth is that I could kind of almost tell you what the finding is now that I've seen it. Yeah. And the teams that are able to grow to a large extent, to a bigger number, that are in the 20 plus people on the team, they've gotten really good at finding self-starters. And they could be anywhere in their career, but they're self-starters, and they're very good about knowing when to cut ties. You get an opportunity to join the team, sink or swim, right? And that it kind of creates a culture of just execution and get stuff done, and maybe sometimes feel less collaborative, but that's where sometimes I come in and help them think through, okay, how do we build on your culture a bit so that it does feel more even like a family to some extent, without creating this expectation that you can lean on the team more than you should, right? Everyone's got to do their part.
I agree. I mean, everybody does have to do their part in outlining what everybody's part is, but it's interesting within that the self-starter. It's really funny from doing this podcast, or interesting, I should say, is that subset of people tend to be athletes or just high performers in another category prior to getting into the business. Not necessarily all athletes, but there's a large category of people who just there's a level of like
They
discipline.
operate at a different level. They have
Yeah.
discipline. They accomplish a lot in a given amount of time. I think that's a great way to think about it. Where I've helped clients, especially larger teams, in that as a real estate agent, if they're very good as an agent, you've got this kind of natural sales ability. And at the end of the day, you're people, right? Like great agents are just really great with people and they know how to sell themselves, sell their team, right? And so I've had situations where, the team, I think, isn't putting in the work up front in their kind of recruiting process of asking the right questions and really challenging the people that want to join their team. They fall into this default sales mode where like they're interviewing someone, they might end up selling themselves way more than necessary, right? And did you really get the information you needed from that person to know this is going to be a good fit?
That is amazing
so,
that you've observed that. I can't interview people first because I like I totally turn.
You should be the closer, right?
I totally do.
I'll come in last.
100%. Like I'm not interviewing them. I'm just trying to close them. And it's like I literally cannot interview people first. Kat, who's on my team, she's like first pass, and then if she vets them and feels they're qualified, then she passes them to me. Because it's weird. I have when it comes to hiring, 100% the worst person at it, because to your point, I just close.
It's uncomfortable because to some extent you have to grill them a little, you have to challenge them, ask hard questions, try to almost like, catch them, in how they would handle, and so that if that's not your style, that's really hard to do. I'm not going to say I'm great at it. But if you're aware of this, if it were just you, for example, and you wanted to improve this, then just that awareness is huge. And then coming up with a list of questions that that you're going to go through, in the beginning of every meeting, no matter what, right? Before you get into, okay, happy, salesy Shawn, right?
It's funny. The two things I figured out really quick was before I had a team is I actually would have my sales manager interview somebody for me and just be like, hey, can you give me your opinion? Because obviously they've talked to a ton of people. And then the other thing I did, to your point, is I had a list of questions, and then I would, on a scale of 1 to 5, I would give them a grade depending on their answer. And so I tried to really detach myself from it, because to your point, immediately if I was able to go off the rails and do my own thing, I would 100% turn on sales brain and be like, how do I close them? Like, how do I get them?
Yeah.
How do I get
And if you like them even a little, some people are very good first impression, whether they have substance or even if they're great, they just might not be great at the thing you need them to be great at, right? And so, like, how do you make sure you tease all that out and use that time really effectively?
And I like to rewind a little bit. I like what you said earlier, and I feel like there is this weird pressure in our industry where it's like, oh, you're doing really well, build a team. And that's like not necessarily everybody's DNA. Not everybody's an entrepreneur in that category. And I feel like, and I've said this before, and it's kind of volleying off what you said, is there should be some sort of self-evaluation of, do I actually want to start managing people? Do I want to be a part of that other thing, or do I just really have passion for this and I want to do more of it?
Yeah. So I think that the core question, and that's again why I spend so much time up front just getting to the core of who my client is and helping them see that core, right? And reconnect with like what their center is. But the biggest question, the one thing I know for a fact is if you love what you do, you will be great at it, right? And so the question should be not should I build a team, but do I like how I'm spending my time right now? Is this the best use of my time? If there are other changes, like what would those changes be? How would that impact, how much I enjoy my time, right? And so, I think that there are people who do want to spend more time managing others and training others. They want more of that, like, mentor-mentee dynamic in their life, right? And so that makes sense. Maybe they're not into, hand-holding clients so much. Maybe they would be happy to hand off their clients to team members, right? So it's like, what is it that gets you going? And so it's trying to catch yourself in those moments of flow and of just, ease when you're just like getting through your day. Like, think about the days that have been great days. Like, what were you doing those days? How can you make sure you're doing more of those things? And that might lead you to building a team. That might actually lead you away from building a team. So that's, I think, the focus.
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, and I like that. It's simple. It's like, find those days that you really loved, and what were those activities? What were you engaged with?
What were those activities? Now, let's be real though. It is always about, for many agents, it's also just about production and making more money. And so and so that's the other piece. And you want to make sure that that it all at the end of the day does align with you producing well enough for your needs, right? And so whatever that means for everybody. And if it really is that you want to make a lot of money, the people who make a lot of money, they spend a lot of time doing things they don't like. And until they've earned the right to delegate those things and hire, for those things and do less of them, right? So up front, it's just grunt work at first. There's no shortcut for the hard work.
Amen. I mean, I've always said, there's no job beneath you. Especially in the beginning, just get it done. Like, if the toilet needs cleaning, you just got to clean the toilet. If you don't have the resources.
Yeah, you're about to, start an open house and
exactly
something, you just roll up your sleeves, get it done, right? Because, that's what's gonna lead you to success.
Exactly. I mean, that's going to ultimately make the sale is it's positioning the property perfect, and that's just what you have to do. There's, in talking to you now and in hearing you speak prior to this, I always pick up from you that you have this, I don't know how to articulate it. It's almost, you have this just do it attitude, even with your own work, and then you're like, and I'll figure it out as I get there type attitude. Did you always have that, or is that something you've worked on and developed through the years?
No, I think I think even me as a child or me as a teenager, was definitely my approach. And I remember my first job out of college, it was a bit too much of that. I remember my first manager basically saying, Benis, why are you in such a rush? Just slow down, take your time with this project or whatever it was, this task. And I'm just I just want to check things off the box. I just want to get stuff done. I want to move things off my plate. That's just my style. And I remember as a young person starting to realize what my goals were and figuring out okay, what are the steps to get to that goal? And again, I just want to do it. Maybe not always having the patience. But in some ways, I think that served me well. I think you can spend a lot of time planning and thinking and, just getting in the business of doing it. I remember when I was starting as a coach, and I was in a program, Columbia's Teachers College. It was a cohort of 35 people a year that they accept for this coaching certification. And in order to get your certificate, you had to launch yourself as a coach and get paid as a coach.
Serious?
And yes, and it was so scary. Honestly, that is the reason why I launched my practice, is I had to do it because I've already invested all this money in the program, and I wasn't going to not finish, right? It's I had to check that box. And so once I knew that was a requirement, I just put together a website and just put myself out there. Whereas some of the other people in my cohort were just waiting. They're waiting for, I don't know, perfection, or for their website to be perfect, or this. And it's once I get my first client, I can officially call myself a coach, and the rest of it I can fine tune as I go. Because and this is actually one of the principles of entrepreneurship at Compass, which is learn from reality, and it's one of my favorite. I actually believe the first three can really stand on their own. You just do those three in a cycle. You dream big, you move fast, and then you learn. from reality. And you can only learn if you're moving fast and you're paying attention as you go along and getting real feedback from the market and from the people that are involved in what you're trying to accomplish. But you just staying at home and thinking about it and working on a business plan for months and months and months, like that doesn't actually move you closer to any goal. There's no action being taken there. So
yeah, it's very true. I mean, you can think something to death and it'll never come to fruition. But as soon as you put your boots on the ground and you start running and things start happening. And it's interesting. One thing I had to program myself is when you start doing those things, there aren't failures, they're outcomes. And you're either working to get more of the outcomes you want or less of the ones you don't want. But you're not failing. You're actually taking that step anyways, that's massive success.
You learn something. You learn something from what you might call a misstep. You get more clarity on how to continue on in the right direction. You wouldn't get that feedback otherwise if you hadn't failed. So
exactly. I mean, in that first person you had to coach, I'm sure the amount of feedback that you received in real time was tenfold better than you could have thought of prior to.
Definitely. And that was like the real heart of the program was around doing. And I mean, I will tell you that the first day in this coaching program, they had us all coach. They paired us up and had us coach each other and videotape it and then watch it.
Oh my God.
Which is like really traumatizing.
It is.
I was terrible. It was terrible. And they did that on purpose because you want to set a baseline of like, how little do you really know? And then we had to videotape ourselves at the end, and it was just like how far I've come. And it was an interesting exercise. I feel like it'd be interesting if more people could find ways to do that for themselves.
Yeah.
If there's a way, imagine your first sale or your first client, if you can somehow record some of it and look back and say, wow, I really didn't know what I was doing. But you learned because you started doing it.
Well, and fast forward, you can then say, wow, I've come such a long way. Because sometimes when you hit that plateau, you're like, well, I'm not improving. You're like, but you've come like this massive distance to get to this point.
Yes.
So let's go back to Colombia. Is that where you met Robert?
So I actually met Rob, I was 23 and I was at my first job out of college. So I went to college at NYU and my first job out of college was in executive recruiting. And I was about in my third year at that firm, and I mean, do you want the full story?
For sure.
How we met?
Let's have it.
So we were at this. I'm at my firm and it was the head of the president of my firm calls me into his office and says, Benis, I would like you to go to this event later tonight. Marcos, who's an MD at our firm, was going to go with clients. It was like a gala event for a nonprofit, and his client bailed last minute, couldn't come, and he's like, Marcos asked the head of our firm, what should I do? Should I go alone, or maybe I should bring someone? And the head of my firm said, you should take Benis. At the time, I was just like, and I think I alluded to it earlier, I was just like moving fast. I was first to get promoted.
Wow.
Out of my class of associates, like within a year, and I just was like in a rush. But I was also like super bubbly and interpersonal, and I just like he could tell we need to get this girl in front of people. So he asked me to go. I had to go buy a dress because I didn't even have. It was the same night, so I had to go.
Goodness.
I had like $60 little black dress from Express. And I go to this gala and with Marcos, and we get there a little late. The program's already started. So when I get there, Rob is actually already on stage.
Wow.
With his buddy, Wes Moore, who's now governor of Maryland. The two of them are up on stage, and they are roasting their mentor, Ray McGuire, who's also now a mentor of mine. And at the time, he was like head of investment banking at Citigroup. He ran for New York City mayor. And so the two of them are just making fun of Ray. And it was like really sweet, really funny. Before then, Ray was getting honored for the night, and then Rob and Wes get off stage, and they're in the corner, and I see them in the corner, and I catch Rob pointing at me, and so I'm like, I can't be me. I thought he can't be pointing at me. I'm like, someone behind me, because I don't know. It turns out after the program's over, Marcos and I go and to introduce ourselves to the head of the nonprofit that the gala was for. And she pulls Rob over and is like, "This is my wonderful boyfriend." And so he had a girlfriend, but he had noticed me. He was pointing at me, and he asked all his buddies, "Go talk to that girl." And so go talk to that girl, get her card. He was very, very sweet, very thoughtful. He didn't want his current girlfriend to kind of catch wind of anything. And so he didn't really even talk to me. But he then broke up with her and asked me out a week later.
Holy cow.
Which is, yeah, he moves fast.
And now I see, and now it all like makes sense.
And so we went on that first date, and it was a great first date. And swept me off my feet, and I guess the rest is history.
That is unbelievable and amazing.
Yeah. And then it was once we started dating, and really, it was actually Ray McGuire who I developed as a mentor as well after I'd met him that night. Both of them were kind of saying, you should go back to grad school. I thought I'd be in recruiting forever. I had so much student debt from going to NYU. The idea of going back to school was just not something I ever considered. But they're both, really encouraging. And Robert said, "We'll figure it out. Just try to get in." And I did. That's when I decided to go back to school and went to Columbia Business School. And it turns out that Goldman Sachs at the time had a fellowship for minorities and women. And if you were able to secure their summer internship and then get a full-time offer, they would actually pay for business school.
Whoa.
And so that's what I did.
That is incredible.
Yeah. And so, so then we both went to Columbia Business School, but 10 years difference. Rob was class of 2003. I was class of 2012. And then Rob and I overlapped at Goldman Sachs for 6 months.
That's right, because
before he started.
And he was at Goldman Sachs just prior to having this crazy idea to get into the real estate game, right?
Yeah, it was insane. Well, he knew that there wasn't really a next role or a next job at Goldman. He'd kind of reached sort of a ceiling. And he knew he had to figure something out, and I think he was really smart to figure, to plan his next move before they were asking him to leave, right? So he was very good at that, at just thinking through what's the next step in the career, until he Compass, because now Compass is just like, this is gonna be a lifelong career for him, and it's been wonderful to watch him do.
It's been just the trajectory in a very short period has just been.
Yeah, it'll be 12 years in October 4th.
And it was just like, aside from the pandemic, it was like a hockey stick of post-pandemic.
Well, definitely like flat, and like just for a year and a half, 2 years of just like nonsense of them not knowing what they were doing. But it was sort of similar thing. It's like move fast, learn from reality. And so just trying to get into this real estate space, he realized that their approach was completely off. Yeah. And he just did a full 180, a full pivot. And that's what needed to happen. And I'm so glad that he had that clarity, and then just the ability to push through, because not everyone was on board with that. A lot of the team wanted to go down one path. That's the path they were taking. It's very hard to just abandon the plan and almost start over.
I agree. I mean, and as a leader, you can see the road ahead, and not everybody can. And then to get everybody to pivot and be on board it's an incredibly hard, like you're turning an entire ship and everybody's still going in that same previous direction. And that's hard. Interestingly,
he's since then, he's had to basically do it twice. So two more times since then. So then going public, and then I think once you go public and you're just so, your financials as a company are open to the public to see. And then this like complete about face in the market where it was all about grow, grow, grow. And then it was like profitability. And so having to downsize the company so drastically in a very short period of time. And then the second time I would say was then the pandemic, post-pandemic, coming out of the pandemic and going from a 100% remote company to realizing that is not going to cut it long term. And again, I've been very proud at how hard he's been pounding the pavement to get culture back, get people back in the office, because that is how great companies are built. And if you look at all the great companies out there, like Goldman Sachs, their people are back in 5 days a week. They went back to normal, probably one of the first to do that. And it's been really hard. A lot of companies are struggling with it. But I think that's gonna help save Compass for the next cycle.
I agree. I mean, and it's kind of fascinating and sad simultaneously, because in a very short period of time, just globally, we've seen some of the most radical shifts in world history, from a pandemic to incredibly low interest rates to incredibly high interest rates comparatively.
Yes.
And just like, it's like gas pedals all the way down, brake is all the way down, gas is all the way down, brake. And it's like, and then being at the helm of this very large number one brokerage, trying to steer through and around and navigate while being, to your point, under.
From a market perspective, they got hit twice because they were hit for being a tech company, because there was like a tech bubble that burst right after we went public. And then they got hit for being a real estate company with these interest rates. And it's like, oh my God, like, yeah, it has. It's interesting. I've talked recently at events where people are asking me just like how have I worn my coaching hat in service for Robert, and and it's been a lot like helping him get through really some of the toughest things that any leader will ever have to face in all kind of a condensed period of time. It's like really since 2020. 4 years of just tough. It's been a tough 4 years. I'll leave it at that.
100%. I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, I see what we see publicly, and especially knowing the news and how it's based on clicks and not always facts. Not just our industry, but literally all industries, as like the whole commission craziness is going on. But
oh yeah, I forgot about the NAR thing. I mean,
it's like there's so many things that we forget about things. It's like, oh my God, what's happening now?
But I will tell you that despite all that, both Rob and I have like the highest confidence in Compass. I think the strategy of, focusing on culture, getting the best people in every market, the top agents in every market, the ones with integrity, to build from that perspective, and it is what's kept it all together, and it's what gave the tech team, the engineering team, time that would really have impact. And from what I'm hearing, the tech is finally a game changer for everyone, and there's nothing out there that compares. And then that culture is still strong, and there is no other company that can deliver both in that way.
And it's interesting from a company perspective is getting people back in the office because it's about people, but our business is all about relationships. Yes. And so if we as agents are around our colleagues, there is, we talked about teams earlier. There's an energy you get from being around other people who are producing. It's like being a part of a winning team, even if you're not on the team per se, you're around it. And it's like it becomes part of you. And then when you're in front of your clients, which again, it's like that people component.
That same energy, it's all about energy. How do we have this positive flow of energy be continuous, and for our clients to feel it, for for you to get it from, you feed off of each other in many ways. You hold each other accountable. And then there's all these like moments of opportunity that wouldn't happen if you weren't in the same spaces together, right? That quick chat while you're grabbing coffee in the kitchen, in the elevator, you're reminded like, oh, I need to catch up with this person. And, you follow up and, that you find people to collaborate with, right? You build your teams that way. And so,
and it's funny. And that's the one thing that's not tangible. Like you can't quantify it. And I have friends who work at Meta and Apple, and we'll get together and talk, and they'll say the same thing. I was in the office and at the water cooler, and that one person happened to mention that one thing that gave me the breakthrough. But you didn't go to the office, to the water cooler to find that breakthrough. It just happens. And when you're sitting in your silo or in your car or in your office at home, you don't get those little serendipitous moments that sometimes you just get that one little nugget of information, that thing to inspire you, whatever it is, and you can run with it.
People have, it's hard because I know the feeling, and I do work from home. All my coaching is virtual. Most of my clients are not even in New York City. But I have a very full life, and I have kids, and I've got stuff going on. So I'm not going to say that. But if I didn't have a full life, right, and that's all I did, that's lonely. It's going to hit you from a mental health perspective eventually, right? If you're not getting yourself, out of comfort zone. That's it. Nothing grows in the comfort zone. You got to get out.
It's so true. Yeah. You have to get out. It's funny. I was talking to Cielo last night at dinner, and I was like, we've only been in this house for about 3.5, 4 years. And I'm like, I've spent more time in this house than any other house by far that I've ever lived in, because we've had the pandemic, basically the work from home for a couple of years. I'm like, I'm sick of these four walls. We spend way too much time in it.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Really?
And so I appreciate Robert being out there just championing people to be back in front of their clients.
He has to lead by example. There's a lot of heads of brokerages that have moved away from their headquarters, that they're not visiting offices, right? They're not doing and so for Rob to pound the pavement and say, you guys need to come back in, but he himself not go and travel and visit all the markets, it just wouldn't carry as much weight. And so, he's leading by example, and we're doing it together. We're doing it as a family. We recently took the kids on a 15-day tour of Compass markets in California.
How many offices did you visit? I know it was a ton. I was watching Social, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Your kids must have hated it, by the way.
There were 19 offices on the list.
Whoa.
And so if it was a Saturday or Sunday, we didn't visit offices. And we arrived on a Saturday. So we had Saturday and Sunday in San Diego, and it was fun for the kids at first. We did safari, the San Diego Park Safari, which was really fun. And then we did Legoland. And, but then Monday, where it was Compass event, 2 offices in San Diego, and then a dinner with agents. So Monday through Friday, it was 2 to 3 offices a day. And then it was 2 weeks straight. So they at first, I think, were kind of fascinated. Kids, you know how it is. They don't know what they don't know, what they haven't been exposed to. They know a lot of people work at Compass. We have Compass Shabbats, every couple Fridays at our home, and they've been to the offices here in New York. But to go to California and go from one office to another office, and then every time we would arrive at these offices, there would be 200, 300 people there. And they were just like, oh, this is a lot of people, and they got to hear Daddy speak over and over and over again. I also spoke a few times, and they even went up on stage and answered questions. And so for them, it was to finally kind of start to connect the dots of like, oh, this is why daddy's always working. This is why he's literally on the phone welcoming, and we would tell him, how daddy's always on the phone welcoming new Compass agents. He still calls every principal agent that comes. And now they got to see their faces of like, he called that person, and this person. And this is how he's built this company. And we were just in California. It's just one of 50 states, and I don't know if I don't think we're in all 50, but it's getting close.
It's getting close. I don't think it's 50 yet, but it is super close. And it's wild at just watching it grow. But no, I don't think, so my dad had multiple companies and started the one that he sold, which he had for almost, I think it was like 45 years. He started when I was 5, and then he sold it a couple years ago. And so I grew up in the company and seeing all these people, but I didn't really have context until, and he had it. He was always like grinding and working, and my parents were divorced, so he'd have me on weekends, but would have work to do. So I would go and hang out at the office, and his business partner had kids. So we would be like playing on the machine shop floor and like playing with machines, super safe. But it wasn't like fast forward until my 40s where I was starting a business, and I called him up one day and I was like, hey, listen, I would love to pick your brain. I don't want to talk about family. Don't want to talk about anything else. I want to talk about business. I want to put a standing spot on our schedules every Friday and literally just pick your brain. And it wasn't really until that point that I had a lot of aha moments. And I really almost like empathetically understood, oh, that's why his mindset was like this. And this is why he would approach things like this. And this is like, and then I would match it up to like the 80s when the interest rate was really high and the business was tanking. Like, oh, that makes sense why he was stressed during those years. Yeah. And it took me a long time, is my point, to like really understand my parents. And it's like they see it, and they definitely, I know for me, I got that entrepreneurial attitude and that I'll just do it. Part of my personality from being in that environment day in and day out and just seeing it and seeing him like, oh, I got this huge contract. Well, I don't know how to do it, but we'll figure it out.
I will say, my kids, towards the end of that trip, I remember the last like Compass office event we did. I was so tired. Like, I don't know how Robert does it. He really does have a ridiculous amount of energy. He does. And he, like you mentioned earlier, like athlete level. I mean, he used to run marathons. He ran a marathon in every U.S. state. Like the discipline that requires and the output of energy. I don't have that. I just don't. And, we tried to keep up with him, but he was very sweet to just like, not expect much of us that last day. And I remember we were at this beautiful listing in San Diego, and it's a beautiful outdoor space, and the kids and I all just laid on the lounges just to feel it. And then like we didn't move for like an hour. We were just like, we just need to sit here. People would come and talk to us, we're laying down and we're like, yeah, we're completely done. But so, I for them to kind of experience just how much work it takes, and start to connect, because they're privileged kids. We've worked so hard so that they would have so much more than we did. But in some ways, they're missing out on some of that drive and ambition that we have. And so how do we really show them, like, this is what it takes? You want to have this life, you're going to have to work hard.
That's always a tricky one.
It's quite
I have 2 stepkids, and they have a really good life. And it's, and I grew up with my mom, who was a single mom. We lived in a 3rd floor walk up, and then I would go to my dad's on weekend, who had a really nice house. So it was weird growing up literally on both sides of those tracks and seeing like, oh, like over here we're kind of poor, and over here we're not. And it was like very bizarre, which I think was a blessing, though it sucked at the time. But I see,
it's all about exposure.
It is about exposure. And I recently just came back from the Philippines, and it really reminded me how just blessed and lucky
100%.
and how many opportunities we have just abundantly all around us all the time.
2 years ago, we started the habit of going and visiting my family in the Dominican Republic for the holidays, which, I don't think Robert ever loved the idea. And I was waiting until the kids were old enough so that it would just not be so hard for me to do. Because we go to the DR and we're not staying in expensive hotels. We're getting in very cheap Airbnb, and it's still really, really nice compared to the way my father lives and my sister lives, right? And but I know that every year I take them, it just sinks in a little bit more. They get to see a taste of some of that third world kind of country experience. And I will say the DR is actually doing really well. It's looking good. It's not, when I would go as a kid, it was worse. But still, my father lives in the same old beat up house in the middle of nowhere, and barely any furniture. And Ruby, my middle one, for the Christmas this past year, we went there and I showed her, Ruby, this is where I would come and spend the summer with my dad, and this is the room I'd stay in. And she looked at me and she's like, Mom, I feel really bad for you.
Oh, my goodness.
And I told her, don't feel bad. I actually had a great time here. I had fun here. And I don't need to have all those things to have a good time. But more than feel bad, I want you to feel really good just about how great you have it and how beautiful your room is, and you have your own space and all of that. And so, I remember Rob asking me why are we going? Why does this matter to you? Because I don't have this super tight relationship with my family there, but it's for that. It's perspective. This is an opportunity to connect them to their heritage, right? This is where I come from. These are where your ancestors come from. Yeah. There's so much history in that country. It's like a true melting pot. Spaniards, Native people, African slaves, and a bunch of other cultures that arrived, and so, help them have a connection to that. And so, yeah, it was a real special moment.
It sounds really special. I mean, I think, the having perspective, especially as a child, it's incredibly important, because especially with social media, we live in this silo and we get fed the same information over and over. And sometimes when you literally pick up and go to a new, different place, you see the world completely different. So I love that you even toured the kids around and they got to see San Diego, because they see a completely different perspective of their parents. And this is what they do. And I think that's really, I mean, I've never been an incredibly academic person, but I love to learn. And I think the world is the absolute best teacher. And when you can get out there and just touch it and feel it and experience it, your worldview completely changes, and you find a different appreciation in little things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What else? How are we doing on time? Okay.
We're almost at the top of the hour, so we can wrap. Benis, it was an absolute pleasure to sit down and chat with you and just kind of learn more about you, who you are. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And this was a real pleasure. Thanks for having me on here. And feel free to keep in touch, and if I can ever be helpful to you in any way, just let me know.
I appreciate that. And that is a wrap.